The dust swirled around Adelaide Turner's worn boots as she stood at the edge of Belmont, Nevada, clutching the single carpet bag that held everything she owned, knowing that somewhere in this god-forsaken mining town was supposed to be the aunt who had written exactly once to say she would take her in. But the letter in Adelaide's trembling hand was already 3 months old, and the address led to nothing but an abandoned boarding house with broken windows and a rusted sign swinging in the hot August wind. It was 1878, and Adelaide had just turned 19 years old. The stagecoach that brought her from Sacramento had already rumbled away, leaving her standing alone on the main street of a town that looked half dead in the afternoon heat. She had traveled for 6 days to get here, spending the last of the money her mother's estate had provided, which was nothing more than $43, and the clothes on her back. Her mother had died in the spring, consumption taking her slowly and painfully. Before that, Adelaide had never known her father. Her mother had told her once in a moment of bitter honesty that he had been a married man who wanted nothing to do with the child he had created. From the very beginning, Adelaide had been unwanted. Her mother's family had disowned them both. The neighbors in Sacramento whispered about the bastard child whenever Adelaide walked past. Even at her mother's funeral, the preacher had given a sermon about sin and consequences that made it clear he thought Adelaide herself was evidence of her mother's shame. The aunt who had written was her mother's youngest sister, a woman Adelaide had never met. The letter had been formal and cold, stating only that Christian duty required her to offer shelter to her sister's orphaned daughter. But now that aunt was nowhere to be found, and Adelaide stood in the middle of Belmont with no money, no family, and no prospects. She picked up her carpet bag and walked toward what looked like a general store. The sun beat down mercilessly on the wooden buildings and the red dirt streets. Men in dusty clothes moved past her without acknowledgement. A few women in sun-faded dresses gave her suspicious looks before hurrying on. Adelaide pushed open the door to the store, a bell jingling above her head. The man behind the counter was old and weathered, with a gray beard and eyes that looked her up and down with immediate distrust. "Help you?" "I am looking for Mrs. Margaret Winters," Adelaide said, trying to keep her voice steady. "She runs a boarding house, or she did. The address I have is on Silver Street, but the building there appears abandoned." The storekeeper snorted. "Margaret Winters left town 4 months ago, went back east to live with her son. Boarding house shut down when she left." Adelaide felt her stomach drop. "I see. Do you know if she left any forwarding information?" "I am her niece, and she was expecting me." "Lady, I do not keep track of everybody's family business." He turned away, clearly done with the conversation. Adelaide walked back out into the sunlight, feeling the weight of her situation settling over her like a physical burden. She had nowhere to go. No money for a return ticket, even if she had somewhere to return to. She walked slowly down the main street, trying to think. She passed a saloon where piano music tinkled out through the swinging doors. She passed a hotel that looked far too expensive for her non-existent funds. She passed a church with a small graveyard beside it. Finally, she found herself near the edge of town, where a large stable stood alongside several corrals. Horses moved in the enclosed spaces, and she could hear men's voices calling to each other. She noticed a small sign near the stable entrance that read "Help Wanted" in faded letters. Adelaide had never worked with horses, but she had worked. Her mother had taken in sewing and laundry, and Adelaide had helped from the time she was big enough to hold a needle. She could work hard. She had no other choice. She walked into the stable, her eyes adjusting to the dimmer light inside. The smell of hay and horses was strong, but not unpleasant. A young man was mucking out one of the stalls, and he looked up when she entered. "Help you, miss?" he asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "The sign outside says you need help," Adelaide said. "I would like to apply for the position." The young man's eyes widened. "Madam, this is stable work, mucking stalls, hauling water, feeding livestock. It is not work for a lady." "I am not a lady," Adelaide said quietly. "I am someone who needs work, and I am willing to do whatever is required." "You will have to talk to the boss about that." The young man gestured toward the back of the stable. "That would be Yates Emerson. He is out in the back corral working with a new horse." Adelaide walked through the stable past rows of stalls where horses shifted and nickered. She emerged into bright sunlight again in a large corral where a man stood in the center, holding a long rope attached to a magnificent chestnut mare that was cantering in a circle around him. The man was tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting, and several days' worth of stubble on his strong jaw. He wore a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned, muscular forearms. His focus was entirely on the horse, and he moved with an easy grace that suggested he had been doing this his entire life. Adelaide stopped at the fence, not wanting to interrupt. She watched as the man worked with the mare, his voice low and calm, his movements patient and sure. There was something mesmerizing about the way he and the horse seemed to communicate without words. The mare's ears flicked toward him constantly, and gradually her gait slowed from a canter to a trot, then to a walk. "Easy now," the man said softly. "That is good, girl. That is real good." The mare came to a stop, and the man slowly walked toward her, coiling the rope as he went. The horse stood still, watching him, and when he reached her side, he ran his hand along her neck in a long, gentle stroke. The mare lowered her head and blew out a soft breath. Only then did the man seem to notice Adelaide standing at the fence. He looked over at her, and she found herself staring into the most striking gray eyes she had ever seen. They were the color of storm clouds, clear and direct, and they studied her with frank curiosity. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice carrying easily across the space between them. "I am looking for Yates Emerson," Adelaide said. "I want to inquire about the job." The man led the mare toward the fence, still watching Adelaide with those penetrating gray eyes. "I am Yates Emerson. What job would that be?" "The sign out front says you need help." Yates reached the fence and tied the mare's rope to a post. He was even taller than Adelaide had thought, well over 6 feet, and his shoulders were broad beneath the worn fabric of his shirt. Up close, she could see that he was probably around 25 or 26, with a face that was more interesting than handsome, all strong planes and angles. "That sign is for stable hand," he said. "No offense, but you do not look like you have ever mucked a stall in your life." "I have not," Adelaide admitted, "but I can learn. I am a hard worker, Mr. Emerson. I do not mind difficult labor." "Where are you from?" Yates asked, leaning against the fence rail. "Sacramento. I arrived today." "Family in Belmont?" "I thought I did. It turns out I was mistaken." Adelaide lifted her chin, refusing to show the desperation she felt. "I need work, Mr. Emerson. I am willing to do anything honest to earn my keep." Yates was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face. Adelaide forced herself to meet his gaze steadily, even though something about the way he looked at her made her pulse quicken. "What is your name?" he finally asked. "Adelaide Turner." "Well, Miss Turner, I will be honest with you. Stable work is hard. The days start before dawn and end after dark. You will be hauling heavy buckets of water, lifting bales of hay that weigh near as much as you do, and dealing with animals that can be unpredictable. The pay is $30 a month plus room and board. I have a small cabin behind the stable that my last hand used before he moved on. It has one room with a stove and a bed, nothing fancy. If you are serious about wanting the work, I will give you a week's trial. If you can manage it, the job is yours. If you cannot, you will need to find something else." "I can manage it," Adelaide said immediately. Yates looked at her for another moment, then nodded. "All right then, let me show you the cabin and you can get settled. We will start tomorrow morning at 5. He untied the mare and led her back into the stable, with Adelaide following behind. The cabin he showed her was small but clean, with whitewashed walls and a wooden floor that looked recently swept. There was indeed a narrow bed with a simple quilt, a cast iron stove, a small table with one chair, and a basin and pitcher for washing. To Adelaide, who had expected to be sleeping in an alley that night, it looked like a palace. "It is not much," Yates said, standing in the doorway. "It is perfect," Adelaide said quietly. "Thank you, Mr. Emerson." He nodded. I will have one of the boys bring you some firewood. There is a pump out back for water. If you get hungry, there is a cafe 2 streets over called Molly's Kitchen. Tell Molly I sent you, and she will feed you. We can settle up when you get your first pay." "That is very kind," Adelaide said, feeling a lump form in her throat at this unexpected generosity from a stranger. Yates shrugged. Everybody needs help sometimes. He turned to leave, then paused. "Miss Turner? You should know that I do not tolerate laziness or dishonesty. If you work hard and do right, we will get along fine. If you do not, you will be gone. Understood?" "Understood," Adelaide said. After he left, Adelaide sank down onto the bed and finally allowed herself to feel the exhaustion and fear she had been holding back all day. But underneath those feelings was something else, a small, fragile spark of hope. She had a place to sleep tonight. She had the possibility of work and a future, however uncertain. And she had met a man with storm-gray eyes who had shown her more kindness in 10 minutes than most people had shown her in her entire life. She did not know yet that Yates Emerson had watched her walk into his stable and felt something shift in his chest, something he had not felt in all his 26 years. He did not know yet that from the moment he saw her standing at his fence, dust-covered and desperate, but holding herself with quiet dignity, he had decided he would help her no matter what it took. But Adelaide would learn these things in time. The next morning, Adelaide woke in the dark to the sound of roosters crowing. She had barely slept, too anxious about her first day of work. She dressed quickly in the plainest dress she owned, braided her long brown hair, and walked out into the pre-dawn darkness. The stable was already lit up, lanterns glowing golden in the gloom. She could hear horses moving in their stalls and men's voices. She walked inside and found Yates near the tack room, examining a bridle in the lamplight. "Good morning, Mr. Emerson," she said. He looked up and something that might have been surprise crossed his face. "You are early. That is good. Come on, I will show you what needs doing." For the next several hours, Yates patiently taught Adelaide the routines of stable work. He showed her how to muck out stalls properly, how to spread fresh hay, how to check water troughs and feed buckets. He introduced her to each of the horses by name, telling her their temperaments and quirks. There was the chestnut mare from yesterday, whose name was Rosie. There was a big black gelding named Midnight who liked to try to steal carrots from pockets. There was a paint mare named Daisy who was nervous around strangers. There was an old gray horse named Stormy who had once been a champion racer but was now retired and gentle as a lamb. Adelaide listened carefully to everything Yates said, asking questions when she did not understand. The work was indeed hard. The pitchfork felt awkward and heavy in her hands at first. The wheelbarrow full of soiled hay was difficult to maneuver. The water bucket seemed to get heavier with each trip from the pump. But Adelaide gritted her teeth and kept working. Yates did not hover over her or treat her like she was fragile. He showed her what to do, made sure she understood, and then let her do it. But she noticed that he was never far away, and whenever she struggled with something particularly heavy, he appeared at her elbow to help lift or carry. Around mid-morning, a boy of about 16 brought them both tin cups of water. Yates introduced him as Danny, the other stable hand. Danny looked at Adelaide with open curiosity. "I never seen a lady working in a stable before," Danny said. "Then you are seeing one now," Yates said mildly, but there was a note in his voice that made Danny duck his head and mumble an apology. By noon, Adelaide's back ached, her arms trembled with exhaustion, and she had blisters forming on her palms. But she had finished mucking out all 12 stalls, had hauled fresh water to every trough, and had helped Yates feed all the horses their midday ration of oats. When he told her to take a break for lunch, she almost collapsed with relief. "You did good work this morning," Yates said, leaning against a stall door. "Better than I expected, to be honest." "Thank you," Adelaide said, flexing her sore hands. "Your hands are blistered," Yates observed. "Come on." He led her to the tack room and rummaged in a cabinet until he found a small tin of salve. "Give me your hands." Adelaide hesitated, then held out her palms. Yates took her right hand gently in his much larger one. his calloused fingers surprisingly careful as he examined the blisters. His touch sent an unexpected shiver through her. He opened the tin and began applying the salve with feather-light strokes. "This will help them heal faster," he said, his voice low. "Try to wear gloves if you have them. If not, I can lend you a pair." "I do not have gloves," Adelaide admitted. "I will get you some." He finished with her right hand and reached for her left, repeating the process with the same gentle care. Adelaide found herself studying his face as he worked. In the daylight streaming through the tack room window, she could see that his eyes were not just gray, but had flecks of silver in them. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he bent over her hand. There was a small scar on his jaw, white against his tanned skin. His mouth was firm but not unkind. "There," Yates said, releasing her hand. "That should do it." He looked up, and their eyes met, and for a moment neither of them moved. Adelaide felt something pass between them, some spark of connection that made her breath catch. Then Yates cleared his throat and stepped back. "You should go get some food. Be back in an hour." Adelaide nodded and fled, her heart beating strangely fast. She walked to Molly's kitchen, a small establishment with red-checked curtains in the windows. The woman behind the counter was plump and friendly, with graying hair and a warm smile. "You must be the girl Yates hired," Molly said. "He stopped by earlier and said to feed you whatever you wanted on his account." "That is very kind of him," Adelaide said. "Yates is a good man," Molly said as she ladled stew into a bowl. "One of the best in this town. He has had a hard life, but it has not made him bitter like it does some folks. You are lucky to be working for him." Adelaide ate the stew, which was delicious, and listened as Molly chatted about the town. She learned that Belmont had been booming during the silver strikes of the 1860s and early 1870s, but now the mines were playing out and people were leaving. Yates had come to town 3 years ago and bought the stable from the previous owner, an old man who had wanted to retire. He had built the business through hard work and fair dealing, and now he had one of the most successful operations in town. "Does he have family here?" Adelaide asked, trying to sound casual. "No family that I know of," Molly said. "He keeps to himself mostly, works all the time. The women in this town have tried to catch his eye, believe you me, but he has never shown interest in settling down." She gave Adelaide a shrewd look. "Maybe that will change now." Adelaide felt her cheeks heat. "I am just working for him, Mrs. Molly, nothing more." Molly said, but she was smiling. Adelaide returned to the stable to find Yates training a young colt in the corral. She stood and watched for a few minutes, fascinated by the patience he showed, the way he never lost his temper even when the colt shied or pulled away. He had a gift with horses, that was clear. They trusted him. The afternoon brought more work. Grooming horses, cleaning tack, organizing the feed room. Yates worked alongside Adelaide and Danny, never asking them to do anything he would not do himself. He answered Adelaide's questions without impatience, and when she made mistakes, he corrected her gently and showed her the right way. By the time the sun set and Yates told her she was done for the day, Adelaide could barely walk. Every muscle in her body screamed with exhaustion, but she had made it through her first day. "You did well, Miss Turner," Yates said, as they stood outside the stable in the gathering dusk. "Real well. Most people would have quit after the first hour." "I do not quit easily, Mr. Emerson," Adelaide said. "I'm starting to see that." He smiled, and the expression transformed his face, making him look younger and much more handsome. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be just as hard." Adelaide walked back to her cabin, heated water on the stove to wash with, and ate the bread and cheese Molly had pressed into her hands when she left the cafe. Then she fell into bed and slept like the dead. The days began to blur together. Adelaide woke before dawn, worked until her body ached, learned more about horses and stable management than she had ever imagined there was to know. The blisters on her hands healed into calluses, her muscles grew stronger. She learned which horses liked to be talked to and which preferred quiet. She learned to read the weather signs that Yates and Danny took for granted. She learned the rhythms of the stable and the town, and she learned about Yates Emerson. She learned that he was unfailingly fair, that he never raised his voice in anger, that he treated his animals with respect and kindness. She learned that he rose earlier than anyone else and worked later than everyone. She learned that children and dogs followed him in the street because they sensed his gentleness. She learned that when old Mrs. Patterson's milk cow got out, Yates was the one who caught it and brought it home. When the church needed someone to repair their roof, Yates was up there with a hammer. When Danny's mother got sick, Yates paid for the doctor and told Danny to take all the time he needed. She also learned that Yates was watching her, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but with a quiet intensity that made her aware of him in a way she had never been aware of any man. She would look up from mucking a stall to find his eyes on her. She would turn around and nearly bump into him because he had been standing closer than she realized. When they worked side by side, she felt the heat of his body even though they were not touching. And she felt herself drawn to him in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. She found herself looking for excuses to be near him, to hear his voice, to see that rare smile. She found herself noticing things like the way his hands moved when he worked with the horses, strong and sure, the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he lifted something heavy, the way his hair curled slightly at his neck when it got too long. 3 weeks after Adelaide started working at the stable, a man rode into town on a lathered horse asking for Yates Emerson. Adelaide was in the corral when the man arrived, and she watched as Yates came out to meet him. "You the horse trainer?" the man asked. He was middle-aged with an expensive hat and a prosperous look about him. "I work with horses, yes," Yates said. "I have a stallion up at my ranch that has gone mean. Threw my best hand last week and put him in bed for 3 days. I have heard you are the best around at handling difficult horses. I will pay you $50 if you can gentle him enough to be useful again. Otherwise, I will have to put him down, and he is too valuable for that." $50 was a lot of money, Adelaide knew. More than most people in Belmont made in 2 months. "Where is your ranch?" Yates asked. 2 days' ride north, up near Austin. I need you to come stay for a week or two, however long it takes." Yates was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I will need to make arrangements for my stable. Can you give me until tomorrow morning to decide?" "I can give you until noon today," the man said. "After that, I'm asking someone else." After the man left, Yates stood in the stable yard, clearly thinking hard. Adelaide walked over to him. "You should go," she said. "That's a lot of money." "I do not like leaving the stable," Yates said. "Danny is a good kid, but he is not ready to run things on his own yet." "I can help him," Adelaide said. "I've been here 3 weeks. I know the routines." Yates looked at her, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. "You have been here 3 weeks and 2 days, he said quietly. The fact that he had been counting the days struck Adelaide as significant, though she was not sure why. "Then you know I can do this," she said. "Go earn that $50, Mr. Emerson. Danny and I will take care of things here." "It is not that I do not trust you to do the work," Yates said. "It is just—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with what to say. "It is just what?" Adelaide prompted. "I do not want to leave you," Yates said, and the raw honesty in his voice made Adelaide's breath catch. He seemed almost surprised by his own words, as if they had escaped without his permission. They stood there in the stable yard, the morning sun bright around them, and Adelaide felt the world narrow down to just the two of them. She saw the way Yates was looking at her with an intensity that made her whole body flush with heat. She realized with a clarity that was almost frightening that this man wanted her. Not in the crude way that men had sometimes looked at her on the streets of Sacramento, the bastard child who had no father to protect her, but in a way that was deeper and more profound, a way that spoke of genuine caring. "I will be here when you get back," Adelaide said softly. "Will you?" Yates asked, and she understood that he was asking about more than just her presence at the stable. "Yes," she said, and meant it with her whole heart. Yates reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and took her hand in his. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, a touch so gentle it made her shiver. "I need to tell you something before I go," he said. "What is it?" "I heard things in town about why you came here, about your mother and your father, and people saying you were unwanted." His gray eyes were fierce as they met hers. "I need you to know that is not true. Not anymore. You are wanted, Adelaide, very much wanted." Tears sprang to Adelaide's eyes. In all her 19 years, no one had ever said anything like that to her. She had always been the child who should not have been born, the reminder of sin, the burden no one truly wanted. And here was this strong, kind man telling her that she was wanted. "Yates," she whispered, using his first name for the first time. He lifted his hand and brushed away a tear that had spilled down her cheek. "I know this is not the time or the place for this conversation, but when I get back we need to talk. There are things I need to say to you." "I will be waiting," Adelaide said. Yates left that afternoon, riding north with the man who had hired him. Adelaide and Danny ran the stable in his absence, working hard to keep everything running smoothly. Adelaide found herself aching for Yates's presence, missing the sound of his voice and the way he moved through the stable with calm confidence. A week passed, then another. Adelaide began to worry. What if something had happened to him? What if the stallion had hurt him? What if he had decided not to come back? Danny must have seen her anxiety because he said one evening, "Do not worry, Miss Adelaide. Yates always keeps his word. If he said he would be back, he will be back." On the 15th day after Yates left, Adelaide was grooming Rosie in her stall when she heard the sound of hoofbeats in the yard. She dropped the brush and ran outside, her heart pounding. Yates was dismounting from his horse, dusty and tired, but whole and unhurt. When he saw Adelaide, his face lit up with a smile that made her feel like the sun had just come out from behind clouds. "You came back," Adelaide said, suddenly feeling foolish for stating the obvious. "I told you I would," Yates said. He handed his horse's reins to Danny, who had appeared from the feed room. "Take care of him, would you, Danny? Give him a good rub down and extra oats." "Yes, sir," Danny said, grinning as he led the horse away. Yates walked toward Adelaide, and she saw that he was moving with purpose, with a determination that made her pulse race. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the dust on his shirt and the stubble on his jaw, and the intensity burning in his gray eyes. "I thought about you every day I was gone," Yates said. "Every morning when I woke up, every night before I fell asleep. I worked with that stallion, and all I could think was that I needed to finish so I could get back here to you." "I thought about you too," Adelaide admitted. "Adelaide, I know we have not known each other long. I know you came here looking for your aunt and ended up working in my stable instead. I know you have been through hard times, and maybe the last thing you need is some cowboy telling you how he feels, but I cannot keep it in anymore." He took a deep breath. "I am falling in love with you. Maybe I've been falling since the first moment I saw you standing at my fence, looking like you would fight the whole world if you had to. I want you in my life, not just as someone who works for me, but as the woman I come home to, the woman I build a future with." Adelaide felt tears streaming down her face, but these were tears of joy, not sorrow. "I am falling in love with you too," she said. "I never knew I could feel like this about anyone, but you make me feel wanted and valued and like I matter. You make me feel like maybe I am not just the mistake everyone told me I was." "You are not a mistake," Yates said fiercely. He cupped her face in his hands, his palms warm and rough against her skin. "You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. You are strong and brave and beautiful, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you how much you are wanted." Then he kissed her, and Adelaide felt the world dissolve into nothing but sensation. His lips were gentle at first, almost tentative, as if he was afraid of frightening her. But when she leaned into him, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck, the kiss deepened into something that made her whole body sing. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers, "Marry me, Adelaide," he said. "I know it is fast, and I know we should probably wait, but I do not want to wait. I want you to be my wife. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life." "Yes," Adelaide said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married 3 weeks later in the little church on the edge of town. Adelaide wore a simple blue dress that Molly had helped her sew, and Yates wore his best suit. Danny stood up as a witness, beaming with pride. Half the town showed up, curious to see the girl who had come to Belmont with nothing and captured the heart of their most eligible bachelor. After the ceremony, Molly hosted a celebration at her cafe with food and music and dancing. Adelaide danced with her new husband, feeling like she was in a dream. Yates held her close as they moved to the music, and when he looked down at her with those storm-gray eyes full of love, she felt like the luckiest woman alive. That night, Yates carried her over the threshold of his house, a small but well-built structure on the property where the stable stood. He had been living there alone since he bought the business, but now it would be their home together. He set her down gently in the bedroom, and then he took her hands in his. "I want you to know something," he said. "I know your life before you came here was hard. I know people made you feel unwanted, but that ends now. From this day forward, you are my wife, my partner, my everything. You are wanted, Adelaide. You are cherished, and I will spend every day of my life making sure you know it." Adelaide pulled him down to her, kissing him with all the love and passion she felt. "Show me," she whispered against his lips. "Show me how much you want me." And he did, with tenderness and passion and a reverence that made her feel truly beautiful for the first time in her life. In the months that followed, Adelaide and Yates built a life together that was better than anything she could have imagined. She continued to work at the stable, but now as a partner rather than an employee. She discovered that she had a gift for working with the horses, especially the young ones and the ones that were nervous or frightened. Where Yates had strength and calm authority, Adelaide had gentleness and intuitive understanding. Together, they made a formidable team. The stable thrived under their joint management. Word spread about their skill with difficult horses, and people came from farther and farther away to have Yates and Adelaide work with their animals. They hired 2 more hands to help with the increased workload. Adelaide also discovered that she was good at the business side of things. She started keeping careful records of their income and expenses, managing their accounts with a precision that impressed Yates. She negotiated fair prices with suppliers and customers alike, earning respect from people who had initially dismissed her as just the girl who worked in the stable. But more important than the business success was the love that grew between them. Every day, Yates found small ways to show Adelaide how much he valued her. He brought her wildflowers he picked on his rides. He made sure she had the first cup of coffee in the morning. He listened when she talked about her day, truly listened, as if her thoughts and opinions mattered more than anything. And Adelaide bloomed under his love like a plant that had been kept in the dark and was finally brought into the sunlight. The wounded, wary girl who had arrived in Belmont became a confident, joyful woman. She laughed more easily. She met people's eyes without flinching. She learned to accept compliments without wondering what ulterior motive lay behind them. A year after their wedding, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant. She told Yates one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the Nevada sky in shades of orange and purple. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hand. "What is it?" Yates asked, looking at her with concern. "Are you all right? You have been looking tired lately." "I am fine," Adelaide said, smiling. "Better than fine, actually. Yates, we are going to have a baby." For a moment, Yates just stared at her. Then a smile spread across his face, so wide and joyful that it made Adelaide's heart swell. "A baby?" he said wonderingly. "We are going to be parents?" "Yes," Adelaide said, laughing as Yates pulled her into his arms. "I am going to be a father," Yates said into her hair. Then he pulled back to look at her, his gray eyes suddenly serious. "Our child is going to know every single day how wanted they are, how loved. They are going to grow up surrounded by love, Adelaide. I promise you that." "I know," Adelaide said softly. "That is the difference between your child and me. Our child will never wonder if they are wanted." Their son was born in the spring of 1880, on a day when the desert was in bloom and the air smelled of sage and possibility. The birth was long and hard, but when Adelaide finally held her baby in her arms, she wept with joy. He had a shock of dark hair like his father and eyes that would later turn the same stormy gray. They named him William, after Yates's father who had died when Yates was young. Little William was a healthy, happy baby who filled their house with noise and laughter. Yates proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with William when he cried at night, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours just holding his son and marveling at the miracle of him. Adelaide watched her husband with their child and fell in love with him all over again. This was the man people had whispered would never settle down, would never want a family. And here he was, completely besotted with his son, singing off-key lullabies and making silly faces just to hear William laugh. When William was 6 months old, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and their daughter was born in the winter of 1881. They named her Rose, after the mare that Yates had been training the day Adelaide first came to the stable. Rose had her mother's brown hair and delicate features, but she had inherited her father's determination. From the time she could crawl, she was following Yates around the stable, and by the time she could walk, she was insisting on helping with the horses. Life was full and busy and sometimes exhausting, but it was good. Adelaide had never imagined she could be this happy. Every morning when she woke up next to Yates, every time she heard her children laughing, every time she walked through the stable they had built together, she felt grateful beyond measure. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Yates took Adelaide on a picnic up in the hills above Belmont. It was a beautiful May day, and from their vantage point they could see the whole town spread out below them, the stable visible as a cluster of buildings on the edge of the settlement. "Do you remember the day you arrived here?" Yates asked as they sat on a blanket eating the lunch Adelaide had packed. "I remember standing in the middle of town with nowhere to go and no one to turn to," Adelaide said. "I remember thinking I had made a terrible mistake coming here. I remember seeing you walk into my stable looking like you were ready to fight anyone who tried to turn you away," Yates said. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen." "I was dusty and desperate and probably looked half wild," Adelaide protested. "You looked strong," Yates said. "You looked like you had been knocked down but refused to stay down, and I knew right then that I wanted you in my life, even though I did not understand why yet." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small package wrapped in cloth. "I have something for you." Adelaide unwrapped the package to find a delicate silver locket on a chain. She opened it and found 2 tiny photographs inside, one of William and one of Rose. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "I wanted you to have something that reminded you of everything good in your life now," Yates said. "I know your childhood was hard, Adelaide. I know people made you feel like you were unwanted and unloved. But I need you to know that you have a family now who loves you more than anything in the world. You have a husband who thinks you hung the moon. You have children who light up when you walk into a room. You have a life and a home and a future." Adelaide felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I know," she whispered. "Sometimes I still cannot believe how much my life has changed. 5 years ago I was nobody, and now I have everything." "You were never nobody," Yates said fiercely. "You were always somebody important, somebody valuable. The people around you just could not see it, but I saw it, Adelaide. From that very first day, I saw who you really were." "You saved me," Adelaide said. "No," Yates said, cupping her face in his hands. "You saved yourself. You were the one who kept going when you could have given up. You were the one who asked for work when you could have begged for charity. You were the one who learned and grew and built a new life. All I did was give you a chance." "You gave me so much more than a chance," Adelaide said. "You gave me love. You gave me a home. You gave me a reason to believe that I deserved good things." "You deserve everything good," Yates said. And then he kissed her with all the love and passion that had only grown deeper over their 5 years together. They stayed on the hilltop until the sun began to set, talking about their dreams for the future. Yates wanted to expand the stable, maybe buy some land and raise horses of their own rather than just training other people's animals. Adelaide wanted to teach Rose and William about the horses, to pass on the knowledge she and Yates had accumulated. They both wanted more children, a house full of love and laughter. As the years passed, many of those dreams came true. They bought a ranch 5 miles outside of Belmont, a beautiful piece of land with good water and grass. They built a larger house there, with enough bedrooms for a growing family. They kept the stable in town but started raising their own horses on the ranch, developing a reputation for breeding strong, intelligent animals with good temperaments. Adelaide gave birth to 3 more children over the next 6 years. Another boy they named Thomas, and twin girls they named Grace and Hope. The house was always full of noise and activity. Children running through the rooms, dogs barking, horses whinnying in the corrals. William grew up to be as skilled with horses as his father, with the same patient temperament and intuitive understanding. Rose turned out to have a head for business, helping Adelaide manage the accounts and contracts. Thomas was the dreamer of the family, always drawing pictures and making up stories. The twins were still young, but they showed signs of being as determined as their mother and as kind as their father. Adelaide sometimes stood on the porch of their ranch house in the evening, watching her children play in the yard while Yates worked with the horses in the corral, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. She thought about the girl she had been, the one who arrived in Belmont with nothing and nowhere to go. She thought about how close she had come to giving up, to believing the people who told her she was unwanted. And then she thought about Yates, the cowboy who had seen something in her that no one else had seen, the man who had given her not just a job but a home, not just a home but a family, not just a family but a love that had transformed her entire life. One evening when Adelaide was 35 years old, she and Yates sat together on their porch after the children had gone to bed. It was a warm summer night, and the stars were brilliant overhead. They sat in the comfortable silence of 2 people who knew each other so well that words were not always necessary. "Do you ever think about how different your life would have been if you had not come to Belmont?" Yates asked. "Sometimes," Adelaide admitted. "I think about what would have happened if I'd stayed in Sacramento or if I had gotten back on that stagecoach and gone somewhere else. But then I realized that everything in my life led me here, to you, and I would not change a single thing." "Not even the hard parts?" Yates asked. "Not even the pain?" "Not even that," Adelaide said firmly, "because the hard parts made me who I am. They taught me to be strong. They taught me to value the good things when I found them. If I had not been told I was unwanted my whole life, maybe I would not appreciate so much how it feels to be wanted now." Yates took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "You know what I think? I think you were always meant to be wanted, Adelaide. You were always meant to be loved. You were always meant to have a family and a home and a life full of joy. It just took time for you to find your way to where you belonged." "And where is that?" Adelaide asked. Even though she knew the answer. "Here," Yates said simply, "with me, with our children. On this land we built together. This is where you belong, Adelaide. This has always been where you belong." Adelaide leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she said. "I have loved you from the moment you looked at me and saw something worth saving." "I love you too," Yates said, "and I'm going to keep loving you for the rest of my life and beyond." They sat together on the porch, watching the stars and listening to the sounds of the desert night, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would last forever. Years continued to pass, bringing both joys and challenges. There were hard winters when snow buried the ranch and they had to work around the clock to keep the animals safe and fed. There were dry summers when water was scarce, and they had to make difficult decisions about which fields to irrigate. There were times when money was tight, and they had to tighten their belts and make do with less. But through it all, Adelaide and Yates faced every challenge together, their love growing stronger with each year that passed. They watched their children grow and flourish. William married a girl from Austin at 22 and brought her to live on the ranch, where he helped run the horse breeding operation. Rose moved to Carson City to attend a teaching college, returning with a teaching certificate and dreams of starting a school in Belmont for the children of ranchers and miners. Thomas got a job at the newspaper in Austin writing stories about life in the Nevada Territory. The twins, Grace and Hope, were still at home when Adelaide turned 45, vivacious 16-year-olds who were the darlings of every social gathering in the county. They had their mother's strength and their father's kindness, and Adelaide knew they would find their own paths in time. One evening in late autumn, Adelaide was working in the kitchen preparing dinner when Yates came in from the stables. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Adelaide said, leaning back against him. "I am thinking about how I have everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know I could want." "Tell me," Yates said softly. "I wanted to be wanted," Adelaide said, "and you wanted me. I wanted a home, and you gave me one. I wanted a family, and we created one together. I wanted to matter to someone, and I matter to you. Every single day of our life together, you have shown me that I am valued and loved and cherished. You gave me everything, Yates." "No," Yates said, turning her in his arms so they were facing each other. "We gave each other everything. You think you were the only one who was saved? Adelaide, before you came into my life, I was just going through the motions. I worked hard because I did not know what else to do. I kept to myself because I did not think I deserved more. But you changed everything. You showed me what it means to truly love someone, to build a life with someone, to have a partner who makes everything better just by existing. You saved me just as much as you think I saved you." Adelaide stood on her toes and kissed him, pouring all her love into that kiss. After 25 years of marriage, after all the joys and sorrows they had shared, after all the children they had raised and the challenges they had overcome, she loved him more than ever. That love sustained them through the years that followed. They celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren, as William and his wife had given them 3 grandchildren, and Rose had married a rancher and had 2 children of her own. The ranch house was full of laughter and love. 3 generations gathered around the dinner table sharing stories and jokes. Adelaide looked around the table at all these people, her family, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. She thought about the 19-year-old girl who had arrived in Belmont with nothing, who had been told her whole life that she was unwanted and unloved. That girl could never have imagined this future, this abundance of love and connection. Late that night, after everyone had gone to bed or headed home, Adelaide and Yates walked out to the corral where Rosie, now an old mare of nearly 30, stood in the moonlight. The horse nickered softly when she saw them. "Do you remember the day I was training her when you first came to the stable?" Yates asked. "I remember everything about that day," Adelaide said. "I remember being terrified and desperate. I remember seeing you with her and thinking you were the most patient man I had ever seen. I remember you agreeing to give me a job even though you must have known I had no idea what I was doing." "I knew you would figure it out," Yates said. "I saw the determination in your eyes. I saw the strength. And I saw something else, too." "What was that?" "I saw the woman I was going to love for the rest of my life," Yates said simply. "I did not know it consciously yet, but some part of me recognized you the moment I saw you. Some part of me knew you were meant to be mine, and I was meant to be yours." "Destiny?" Adelaide asked, smiling. "Maybe," Yates said. "Or maybe just 2 people who needed each other finding their way to where they belonged." They stood together in the moonlight, 2 people who were no longer young, but whose love had only deepened with time. Adelaide leaned against her husband, feeling the solid strength of him, and knew that this was exactly where she was meant to be. More years passed, bringing the inevitable changes that time brings. Some of the original buildings at the ranch needed to be replaced. Some of the old horses passed away peacefully in their sleep. Yates's hair turned gray, then white. Adelaide found that her joints ached more in the cold weather. But their love remained constant, the foundation upon which everything else was built. When Adelaide was 60 years old, she and Yates took a rare trip away from the ranch, riding up into the mountains for a week alone together. It was something they had talked about doing for years, but had never quite managed with the demands of the ranch and family. They made camp in a beautiful meadow surrounded by pine trees, with a clear stream running through it. They spent their days riding and exploring, and their nights sitting by the fire talking about everything and nothing. On their last night as they lay together under the stars, Adelaide said, "Do you know what the best part of my life has been?" "What?" Yates asked, pulling her closer. "This, all of this, every single day with you. I know people think the best parts are the big moments, like our wedding day or the births of our children, and those were wonderful. But the best part has been all the ordinary days in between, making coffee together in the morning, working side by side with the horses, sitting on the porch in the evening. Those are the moments that made my life beautiful." "I feel the same way," Yates said. "Every ordinary day with you has been extraordinary." They returned to the ranch refreshed and renewed, ready to face whatever the future brought. And the future brought more grandchildren, more celebrations, more challenges overcome together. It brought the satisfaction of seeing their children succeed and thrive. It brought the joy of teaching grandchildren about horses and watching them fall in love with the animals the same way their parents and grandparents had. When Adelaide was 65, Belmont began to change. The last of the big mines closed and more people moved away. The town that had once been bustling was now quiet, with empty buildings and grass growing in the streets. But the ranch thrived, and Adelaide and Yates decided to stay. This was their home, the place where they had built their life together, and they had no desire to leave it. On Adelaide's 70th birthday, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren now filling the house and spilling out into the yard. Adelaide stood on the porch watching them all, marveling at this family that had sprung from two people who had found each other in a dusty Nevada town so many years ago. Yates came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, just as he had done countless times over the years. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I am thinking about the day I arrived in Belmont," Adelaide said. "I am thinking about how terrified I was, how alone I felt. I am thinking about how I thought I had reached the end of everything, when really I was at the beginning." "The beginning of what?" Yates asked, though she knew he already understood. "The beginning of my real life," Adelaide said. "The beginning of being wanted and loved. The beginning of having a home and a family and a purpose. The beginning of everything that mattered." She turned in his arms to face him, seeing the lines on his face that time had carved, the white in his hair that had once been dark, the gray eyes that still looked at her with the same love and intensity they always had. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for wanting me when everyone else said I was unwanted. Thank you for seeing value in me when I could not see it in myself. Thank you for loving me so completely that I learned to love myself. Thank you for giving me this beautiful life." "Adelaide," Yates said, his voice rough with emotion, "you do not need to thank me. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I would choose you again in every lifetime, in every circumstance. You were never unwanted. You were just waiting to find the person who would see you clearly, and I am grateful every day that I got to be that person." They kissed, surrounded by the sounds of their family celebrating, and Adelaide felt complete. She had spent the first 19 years of her life being told she was unwanted, that she was a mistake, that she should not have been born. But she had spent the last 50 years being loved and valued and cherished by the best man she had ever known. And in the end, those 50 years of love had erased all the pain of those first 19 years. They had proven that the people who called her unwanted were wrong. She had been wanted all along. She had just needed to find her way to the Cowboy in Belmont, Nevada, who would want her more than she ever knew anyone could want another person. As the sun set over the ranch that evening, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Adelaide stood with Yates and their family and felt nothing but gratitude. This was her life, the one she had built from nothing, the one she had created with love and determination and hope. This was her home, her family, her legacy. And it all began with a dusty, desperate girl and a cowboy who looked at her and saw not someone unwanted, but someone worth everything. That was the real story. That was the truth that Adelaide carried in her heart for the rest of her long, happy life. She had been wanted all along. She just had not known it yet.